The night the well erupted, I was running toward the square when I heard my mother scream my name. Not from behind me, from the water itself. The fountain had burst open like a wound, flooding the stone plaza where half the village stood frozen. The water wasn't clear anymore. It was dark, thick, moving like it had muscles underneath.
And it was speaking.
Not in words exactly, but in voices we all recognized. Dead voices. Missing voices. Voices that shouldn't exist anymore. Ayo! The water screamed again, and this time everyone heard it. Every head turned toward me. 50 pairs of eyes, all burning with the same question. Why was the cursed water calling my name? I stumbled backward, my sandals slipping on wet stone. I didn't do anything, I said, but my voice came out broken and weak. The crowd moved forward as one body, their faces twisted with fear and rage. Someone grabbed my arm. Someone else shoved me hard. Then the Wellkeeper stepped through the crowd, water dripping from his robes. And he was smiling. That smile told me everything. I was already dead. 3 weeks earlier, the land was dying and taking us with it. The sun had burned for 47 days without mercy. Our wells ran dry one by one until only dust came up when you dropped the bucket. The crops turned to paper in the fields. My little sister Kemi stopped crying because she had no tears left. She just lay in the shade with her eyes half closed, her lips cracked and bleeding. My mother prayed every morning and every night, but God wasn't listening. Or maybe he was listening and just didn't care. Either way, we were dying slowly and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Then the Wellkeeper arrived. Nobody knew where he came from. One morning he was just there, standing in the village square with a cart full of strange tools and a smile that seemed too wide for his face. He was tall, thin, dressed in robes that were too clean for someone who'd been traveling. "I can fix your well," he announced to the crowd. The old one in the center square. "I can make it flow again." The elders laughed at him. That well had been sealed 50 years ago. The Wellkeeper worked through the night. I watched from my window as he moved around the ancient well with his tools, chanting words in a language I didn't recognize. Strange symbols appeared on the stones as he carved them, glowing faintly in the darkness. My mother caught me watching and pulled me away from the window. "Don't look at things that aren't your business," she warned. But by morning, everyone was looking. Water poured from the well in a clear, strong stream. Not a trickle. Not a weak flow. A fountain of water, so pure it looked like liquid diamonds in the sunlight. The entire village gathered around it, crying and laughing and thanking God and the Wellkeeper and anyone else who might be listening. Within 3 days, everything changed. The crops that had been dead stood up green and strong. Children who'd been sick with fever woke up healthy and hungry. Even old Baba Tund, who'd been dying of the coughing sickness, got out of bed and danced. The water was a miracle. That's what everyone said. Living water. Blessed water. Water that loved us back. But the Wellkeeper had rules. "Only I may draw from the well," he announced on the 4th day. "Only I may tend it, clean it, and prepare the water for distribution. This is not cruelty. This is protection. The well is ancient and temperamental. If anyone else touches it, the water may stop flowing." The elders agreed immediately. They would have agreed to anything. The Wellkeeper set up a system. Every morning at dawn, he would draw water and fill the clay pots we lined up in the square. We could take as much as we needed. All we had to do was wait our turn and never touch the well itself. I watched him every morning from across the square. He always arrived before sunrise, carrying a small leather pouch. He would open it, take out something I couldn't see, and drop it into the well. Then he would whisper those strange words again before drawing the water. One morning, I got brave. I crept closer while he was distracted, looking into his cart. That's when I saw them. Symbols carved underneath the wooden bucket. The same symbols from the sealed tombs in the old burial grounds outside the village. Death markings. The first vanishing happened on a Tuesday. Old Mama Folake's goat drank deeply from the trough we'd filled with well water. By Wednesday morning, the goat was gone. No tracks leading away. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just an empty pen with the gate still latched from the outside. Mama Folake went to every house asking if anyone had seen her goat. Nobody had. It was like the animal had dissolved into air. The Wellkeeper said wild dogs probably took it during the night, though he couldn't explain how they'd opened and closed a latched gate. Within 2 days, everyone had forgotten about the goat entirely. Even Mama Folake stopped asking. When I mentioned it to my mother, she looked confused. "What goat?" she asked. But I remembered. And that night, I had the dream. I was standing in a vast underground chamber, so dark I couldn't see the walls or ceiling. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. And in the center of the space, Mama Folake's goat stood perfectly still, staring at me with human eyes. It opened its mouth, and my name came out in a voice that wasn't animal or human. "Ayo," it screamed. "Ayo, run." I wasn't the only one having the dreams. 3 days after the goat vanished, I overheard some women talking at the well. They were describing the same dark chamber, the same dripping water, the same feeling of being watched by something massive and hungry. One woman said she'd seen her dead father standing in the darkness. Another said she'd seen her own face carved into the stone walls. "It's just dreams," the Wellkeeper said when someone brought it up during water distribution. "You're all experiencing gratitude sickness. Your bodies were so deprived of water for so long that now you're overwhelmed by abundance. The dreams will pass. Just keep drinking." And people did. They drank and praised the Wellkeeper for his wisdom. But I started paying attention to patterns. Everyone who had the dreams had been drinking the well water daily. My father, who worked in the next village and only drank from our well on weekends, never had the dreams. My little sister Kemi, who drank the least because she was small, had them only once. I was connecting pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. That evening, as I carried water home, the Wellkeeper called out to me. "Ayo," he said, his voice friendly, but his eyes cold. "What have you been dreaming about?" I told the council everything the next day. The 5 elders sat in a semicircle under the baobab tree while I explained my suspicions. The goat, the dreams, the symbols under the bucket, the way people were forgetting things. I even mentioned how the water tasted slightly different each time, like it was changing, adapting, learning what we wanted. Chief Okonkwo listened with his arms crossed. Chief Amina kept shaking her head. The others just stared at me like I'd grown a second face. When I finished, the Wellkeeper stood. He didn't look angry. He looked sad, like I'd disappointed him. "This boy is suffering from gratitude sickness, worse than anyone," he said gently. "He's inventing conspiracies because his mind can't accept that something good has happened without a cost. I've seen it before. The cure is simple: rest, prayer, and continued hydration." The elders nodded. Chief Amina even patted my shoulder. "Go home, Ayo. Stop worrying so much." My mother grabbed my arm and dragged me away before I could say anything else. At home, she slapped me hard across the face. "You will not speak of this again," she hissed. "You will not embarrass this family. The Wellkeeper saved us. Show some respect." That night, I stopped drinking the water. The forgetting got worse. One morning, I mentioned Baba Yemi, the old carpenter who'd lived 3 houses down. My mother looked at me blankly. "Who?" she asked. "Baba Yemi. He made that chair you're sitting on." She looked at the chair, then back at me. "I've always had this chair," she said slowly. "I don't know anyone named Baba Yemi." I ran to Baba Yemi's house. The door was open. Inside, everything was covered in dust, like nobody had lived there for months. But I'd seen him just 2 weeks ago, carrying wood through the square. I asked 5 different people about Baba Yemi that day. None of them remembered him. It was like he'd been erased from reality itself. That evening, I went to the well to draw water for my mother. I didn't drink it anymore, but I had to keep up appearances. As I leaned over to lower the bucket, I caught my reflection in the water below. And my reflection blinked. I hadn't blinked. My reflection did it on its own, slow and deliberate, like it was trying to tell me something. Then it smiled, and I jerked backwards so hard I dropped the bucket. I returned to the well at midnight. The square was empty, silent except for the wind moving through the market stalls. The well sat in the center, like a mouth waiting to be fed. I brought a torch and crept closer, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. The symbols carved under the bucket were definitely burial markings. I'd seen them before on the sealed tombs outside the village, the ones the elders said should never be opened. These symbols weren't just old. They were warnings. I traced my fingers over them, trying to remember what my grandmother had taught me before she died. This one meant hungry. That one meant keeper. This one meant debt. I was so focused on the symbols, I almost didn't hear the breathing. It came from inside the well. Deep, slow, wet breathing like something massive was sleeping just below the surface. I leaned over carefully, holding my torch high. The water was much deeper than it should be. I could see down and down and down, further than any well should go. And at the very bottom, something moved. A face looked up at me. Then another. Then dozens of them, all pressed against some invisible barrier, all staring up with empty eyes. One of them was Baba Yemi. The elders finally ordered the well sealed. It took 3 days of arguing, but Chief Amina convinced them. Too many people were having nightmares. Too many small things were going wrong. Better to be safe, she said. We could reopen it after a proper blessing from the priests in the capital. The Wellkeeper didn't argue. He just nodded and stepped aside while the village men rolled a massive stone over the well's opening. They poured concrete around the edges to seal it completely. That night, the entire village celebrated. Music played. People danced. Children ran through the square laughing. We'd been saved from whatever evil might have been growing in that water. Everything would go back to normal now. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to drink and dance and forget everything I'd seen. But at midnight, I woke to a sound that made my blood freeze. The well was breathing. Not the soft breathing I'd heard before. This was loud, desperate, angry breathing. Like something huge had been holding its breath and finally couldn't anymore. I ran to my window and looked out at the square. The stone covering the well was rising and falling, like a chest expanding with breath. The only person who seemed to remember the truth was Elder Chikwudi. He was 90 years old and blind, sitting in his compound while his grandchildren took care of him. When I came to him with my questions, he was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke in a voice that sounded like dried leaves. The well feeds on remembrance, he said. That's what my grandmother told me when I was young. Names are currency to it. Every time someone is forgotten, the well grows stronger. Every time a memory is erased, it drinks deeper. How do we stop it? I asked. You can't, he said. The well was here before the village. It'll be here after. All you can do is refuse to feed it. I asked him what that meant, but his eyes went distant. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. Who are you? He whispered. Why are you in my house? I left him there, my hands shaking. The well had taken him mid-sentence. It had erased me from his mind while I was sitting right in front of him. The Wellkeeper's calm finally broke. He stormed into the village council meeting 3 days after the sealing, his face red with rage. You've made a terrible mistake, he shouted. The well must remain open. It must be tended. If you don't break that seal immediately, consequences will follow. Chief Okonkwo tried to calm him. We'll reopen it after the priests. There's no time for priests, the Wellkeeper screamed. You don't understand what you're dealing with. That well isn't just water. It's a living thing, and you've just buried it alive. Do you know what happens when you trap something that powerful? The elders looked at each other nervously. Chief Amina asked, Are you saying the well is dangerous? The Wellkeeper seemed to realize he'd said too much. He took a breath and forced a smile. I'm saying it requires proper care. Break the seal tonight, or tomorrow your children will suffer for it. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. The elders broke the seal that evening. By morning, little Kemi was gone from her bed. No signs of struggle. No screams. Just an empty sleeping mat and a puddle of water where she'd been lying. I found the tunnels by accident. Searching for Kemi, I noticed that water was seeping from cracks in the old granary foundation. When I pressed against the wall, It gave way, revealing a narrow passage leading down into darkness. I grabbed a torch and descended. The tunnel opened into a vast network of chambers beneath the village. The walls were carved with faces, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Some looked ancient, weathered by time. Others looked fresh, recently made. I recognized some of them. Baba Yemi, Mama Foleg's goat, somehow rendered in stone with human features. 3 children who'd supposedly moved to the city last year. A woman whose name I couldn't remember, but whose face haunted me. And there, in a newer section, I saw Kemi's face beginning to form in the rock. I pressed my hand against it and felt warmth. She was still alive somehow, trapped inside the stone or behind it or beneath it. I dug at the rock with my fingers until they bled, but it was like trying to claw through solid iron. That's when the walls started whispering. Ayo, they breathed, in voices that layered over each other like a terrible choir. Ayo, Ayo, Ayo. My name echoed through the chambers, growing louder and more insistent, until I couldn't tell if it was coming from the walls or from inside my own head. The Wellkeeper found me in the tunnels. You shouldn't be down here, he said calmly, appearing from a passage I hadn't noticed. These places aren't meant for the living. Where's my sister? I demanded. He sighed like I was a child asking foolish questions. Your sister is part of the water now. She's serving a greater purpose. The well requires sacrifice, Ayo. It always has. That's the truth nobody wants to accept. You're feeding people to it. I'm keeping the village alive, he corrected. The well provides water, health, prosperity, everything you need to survive. But nothing is free. The well has always demanded payment. A life here, a memory there. A child every few months. It's a small price for what you receive in return. My sister isn't a price, I said. The Wellkeeper's expression hardened. Your sister is already gone. The well is bound to this village through ancient agreements made long before either of us were born. You can't leave and escape it. You can't refuse it. The best you can do is accept the bargain and live well while you can. There has to be another way. He smiled that terrible smile. Then find it. But do it quickly, because the well knows you're asking questions. And it's getting hungry again. The Wellkeeper turned the village against me the next day. He called a gathering in the square and stood before everyone with tears in his eyes. I've tried to help this boy, he said, pointing at me. But he's been poisoned by suspicion and pride. He refuses to drink the blessed water. He speaks against the well. And now his sister has vanished, and I believe he knows why. The crowd murmured. My mother looked at me with horror. The well is angry, the Wellkeeper continued. It has sustained us for weeks, asking nothing in return. But now it senses betrayal in our midst. Someone has been defiling the sacred space, digging in forbidden places, disturbing the balance. Until that person is punished, the well will continue taking our children. Chief Okonkwo stood. What punishment does the well demand? The old punishment, the Wellkeeper said. The betrayer must be returned to the water, given back to the source. Only then will balance be restored. The crowd closed in around me. Hands grabbed my arms, my shoulders, my hair. I screamed that he was lying, that he was the one feeding people to the well, but nobody listened. They dragged me across the square, while I kicked and fought. The last thing I saw before they threw me into the well was my mother's face, blank with the forgetting that was already taking hold. I fell for longer than should have been possible. The well opened wider inside than outside, expanding into a vast shaft that seemed to have no bottom. I saw faces in the walls as I fell, all the people who'd been taken, all the memories that had been erased. They reached for me with hands made of stone and water. Then I hit the surface. Not ground. Water. Deep, cold water that glowed with its own sick light. I gasped and thrashed, trying to stay afloat, expecting to drown. But the water held me up gently, almost lovingly, and carried me to a shore I hadn't known existed. I crawled onto wet stone, coughing and shaking. When I looked up, I saw them. The missing. All of them. Standing in rows along the shore. Perfectly still, their skin pale and their eyes empty.
Baba Yemi.
The the carpenter's wife, the 3 children, Mama Folek's goat, now twisted into something almost human, and Kemi. My little sister stood among them, staring at nothing. Kemi, I screamed, running to her. I grabbed her shoulders and shook her, but she didn't respond. Her skin was cold. Her eyes didn't blink. She was alive but not alive, present but gone, trapped in some space between existence and memory. I found a passage leading out through the tunnels. It took hours of crawling through the wet darkness, following air currents and the faint sound of voices above. I emerged in the old granary, covered in mud and bleeding from a dozen cuts. The Wellkeeper's cart was there, abandoned. I tore through it frantically until I found what I was looking for, his ledger. It was bound in leather that felt wrong against my skin, too soft and warm, like it was made from something that had once been alive. Inside were names. Hundreds of names written in fading ink. Next to each name was a date and a notation. Taken, forgotten, transformed, consumed. I found Baba Yemi's name, Mama Folek's goat, the 3 children, and at the very bottom of the current page, written in fresh ink, Kemi, taken. This was proof. This was everything I needed to show the village what the Wellkeeper had been doing. But when I turned to the final page, my blood went cold. The page was blank except for one word slowly forming itself in ink that seemed to bleed from the paper itself. Ao. The ledger was alive. I watched in horror as more letters appeared on the blank page, writing my name over and over in different scripts and languages. The ink spread like blood, forming patterns and symbols around my name that I recognized from the well. I slammed the book shut and ran. But that night, I had the worst dream yet. I was back in the underground chamber, but this time I wasn't alone. The water had risen, and it was speaking in a voice made of 1,000 drowned voices layered together. Your name tastes sweet, it whispered. Full of questions. Full of resistance. When we take you, we'll drink slowly. Make it last. I woke up screaming. My mother wasn't in the house. Neither was my father. When I ran outside, I found them in the square with everyone else, gathered around the well. They were chanting. All of them. The same strange words the Wellkeeper used, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm that made my skull ache. The Wellkeeper stood at the center, holding the ledger high. He saw me and smiled. There he is, he called out. The one who refuses the water. Come, Ao. Come and see what happens to those who reject the gift. The Wellkeeper told me his story while the village chanted. I was just a farmer, he said. 60 years ago, when the first drought came, I was young, stupid, desperate. I found the old well and made a deal with what lived inside. Give me power to save the village, I said. Let me be the one who brings water. It granted your wish, I said. It granted my wish, he agreed. But it made me its servant. Every few weeks, I have to feed it. Names, memories, lives, whatever it hungers for. In exchange, it keeps me young, keeps me alive, keeps the water flowing. I've been doing this for 60 years, Ao. 60 years of watching people I saved grow old and die, while I stay the same. 60 years of feeding neighbors and friends to something I can't control. You could have stopped. No, he said quietly. I couldn't. The well won't let me die. I tried drowning myself in it. I tried hanging myself, poisoning myself, throwing myself from cliffs. Nothing works. I'm bound to it until it finds a replacement. He looked at me with something that might have been pity. Someone who understands what it is. Someone who's seen the truth and survived. Someone who knows how to feed it properly. You want me to replace you. The well wants you, he corrected. It's been testing you, tasting you, preparing you. Tonight, during the ritual, I'm going to offer you to it as my replacement. You'll take my place, and I'll finally be free to die. The ritual began at midnight. The villagers formed a circle around the well, still chanting, their eyes glazed and empty. The Wellkeeper led me to the edge, his grip on my arm iron-strong despite his thin frame. One life can seal the well forever, he whispered. That's what it tells everyone. But it's lying. The well can't be sealed. It can only be served. The person who goes in doesn't close it. They become part of it. They become the new keeper. Then I'll refuse, I said. You can't refuse. The water is in your family now. In your mother, your father. In everyone you love. If you reject the well, it will take them all, one by one, until nothing remains but memories no one can hold. The well began to glow, light rising from its depths like a sick dawn. The water rose with it, spilling over the edges, flooding the square. The villagers didn't move. They just kept chanting as the water reached their ankles, their knees, their waists. The wellkeeper pushed me closer to the edge. Jump in willingly, he said. Make the choice yourself. It's kinder that way. I looked into the water and saw my reflection staring back. But this time it wasn't just my face. It was Kemi's face, Baba Yemi's face, all the faces of everyone the well had taken, layered together into something that was me, but also something much larger and hungrier. The ledger in the wellkeeper's hand began to smoke. The ritual reached its peak. The wellkeeper held the ledger high, and it burst into flames. Blue flames that didn't burn the leather, just consumed the names written inside. One by one, they turned to ash and blew away on a wind that came from nowhere. Baba Yemi's name. The children's names. Mama Folake's goat. All of them erased from the book and from memory itself. But one name wouldn't burn. I saw it clearly as the wellkeeper lowered the book, his face confused and frightened. There, on the final page, written in ink that glowed like fresh blood. Wellkeeper. Not my name. His. The well had made its choice. Elder Chakuti's voice cut through the chanting. The old man stumbled into the square, his blind eyes somehow focused and clear. The well never asked for sacrifice, he shouted. It fed on fear. It fed on the lie that nothing good comes without a cost. The wellkeeper told us we needed to pay, so we believed him. But he was the only debt. The villagers stopped chanting. The spell broke like glass shattering. The wellkeeper tried to run, but the water grabbed his ankles. It rose around him in tendrils, wrapping his legs, his waist, his chest. He screamed and thrashed, but the water was gentle, almost loving, as it pulled him toward the well. No, he begged. I gave you everything. I fed you for 60 years. The water showed us the truth then. Images formed in the flooding square, memories pulled from the well itself. We saw the wellkeeper making his deal. We saw him poisoning the other wells to make the village desperate. We saw him pushing the first villager into the water, then the second, then the third. We saw him adding his potions to the water, making it addictive, making us forget. Every blessing had been stolen. Every miracle had been murder. And the well hadn't demanded any of it. He had. The crowd turned on him. Hands reached for the wellkeeper, the same hands that had dragged me to the well, now grabbing him instead. But they didn't need to. The water was already taking him, pulling him inch by inch toward the mouth of the well. Please, he screamed, looking at me. Tell them I was trying to help. Tell them the well demanded it. But I said nothing. I just watched as the water showed more truth, image after image of his crimes playing out in the flooded square. 60 years of lies. 60 years of murder disguised as salvation. The wellkeeper began to cry. I remember all of them, he whispered. Every face. Every name. Every person I fed to this thing. I remember everything, and I can't forget. That's the real curse. Not immortality. Memory. The water reached his mouth, his nose, his eyes. He tried to speak, but only bubbles came out. Then the water pulled him down, and he was gone. The well drank him slowly. We all watched as the wellkeeper sank deeper and deeper, his arms reaching up one final time before disappearing beneath the surface. The water glowed brighter, then dimmed, then went completely still. The chanting stopped. The spell broke. People looked around confused, like they'd just woken from a long sleep. My mother saw me and screamed my name, running to hold me. My father followed. Around the square, families were reuniting, crying, trying to understand what had happened. But Kemi didn't come back. None of them did. The water began to drain, flowing back into the well like it was being pulled by some unseen force. It drained and drained until the square was dry again. Then the well itself began to crumble. The stones fell inward, collapsing into the depths. The ground shook, and when the dust settled, there was just a hole in the earth, deep and dark and finally empty. The well dried permanently that night. We filled the hole with dirt and stones and concrete. We planted a tree on top of it, a strong one with deep roots that would hold the earth together. Chief Chakotay performed a blessing, asking the ancestors to guard the place and keep whatever lived below from ever rising again. The missing were remembered again. Their faces came back to us in dreams and memories, clear and sharp after weeks of forgetting. But they didn't return. The tunnel chambers beneath the village remained, filled with carved faces that would never move or speak. Kemi's face was there, preserved in stone, her eyes closed like she was sleeping. I visited her sometimes, bringing flowers, telling her about the village, about how we'd rebuilt without the cursed water. We survived. We learned to dig proper wells, to pray for rain, to live within our means instead of accepting gifts we didn't understand. The village grew humbler, quieter, but stronger for it. If only they knew what the Wellkeeper did to the water. If only they knew he'd poisoned our miracle with his own fear and greed. They would have asked what the water wanted in return. But the water wanted nothing. It never did. It was only waiting to collect what the Wellkeeper had promised. Himself.